And welcome into this edition of Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John's. He is Denny Thompson. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green, and Denny, 1 week closer to some clarity for this Florida Gator 2020 campaign. Last week, maybe a couple of nervous moments. Kentucky up 10-7, getting pretty late in the second quarter. Obviously, though, Florida was clearly the superior team, pulled away and won going away by 24.
Yeah, I mean, there's some good to that, and there's some bad. You obviously don't want to see them play maybe their worst all-around game this time in the season. There's something about Kyle Trask the last 2 weeks that I'm not liking. I remember I said last week, just didn't like the way the ball was coming out of his hands. It happened again this week.
Yeah.
You know, if you go back and you look at 3 games ago, forget the opponent, but he had some juice behind the ball. For the first time.
Oh, against Arkansas.
Yeah, yep. It was Arkansas, and then even the week before that, it was like, wow, this guy does have an NFL arm, and now all of a sudden, it's I don't know, it just looks different, and maybe I'm the only one that's seeing it. I don't know.
Well, you are a quarterback coach. I think it's funny because my thought on that, and I'll listen to you because obviously you're the quarterback guy. If you go by pure numbers, he's thrown for like 600 yards, 6 touchdowns, and no picks.
Yeah.
In the last 2 games.
Yeah, no doubt. I went back and watched the Kentucky game again, and he had what I'm looking at with Kyle Trask right now, and this maybe is not even relevant. It isn't relevant to the Florida Gators, but kind of his draft prospects. And he had 7 throws in that game that were no-nos in the NFL. Like, no way you make them. No way you make them. As opposed to earlier in the year, he'd have 1 or 2. And I don't know if it's a comfort thing that he knows his guys can go up and get it. I'm not real sure what it is, but need him to step back on the gas. And right, statistically, you're right. Like, he's doing everything right. He's a Heisman front runner, all that kind of stuff. But I think with Alabama around the corner, need him to step back on the gas and get those reads a little bit back to where they were at the beginning of the year and get that arm juice back up a little bit.
You know, Denny, Florida over the years, you try not to say statements that are outlandish, and I don't think this is outlandish. That's why I'm curious your thoughts. You know, you go back to the days of obviously Ike Hilliard, Riedel Anthony, Jaquez Green, Chris Doering. You can even go before that, obviously, to the Alvarez and the Chandlers of the world. Obviously, Percy Harvin. You could argue that Kyle Pitts right now is having one of, if not the greatest season for a wide receiver / tight end in Florida football history. The guy has played 6 games. He's got 11 touchdown catches in 6 games. I saw a crazy stat where he's been targeted 42 times, and he has not dropped a pass.
Yeah.
I guess they have a stat now where if you could get your hands on the ball and you don't secure it, it's technically a drop. Pitts doesn't have one of those.
In fact, he's got a couple of catches that were outside of that target range that he went up and got.
Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it is. I was thinking during the game the other day, it's a shame that, I mean, for obvious reasons, it's a shame where everybody's going through what they're going through in 2020, but specifically for Kyle, because what would their stats look like in a 12, 13 game, possibly 15 game schedule as compared to what history shows us?
Well, right? You're right, but Trask is probably going to break the Gator record for touchdown passes in a season.
Right. Forget Gator records. Okay. And let's, like, national records. You know, how close would he have gotten? Like, what would have the direct comparison through 15 games have been with Joe Burrow if they're lucky enough to play 15? But the bigger one is Kyle Pitts. If you have a regular year and he doesn't get injured, what is he on pace for? I mean, it's historical numbers that probably don't get touched for at least 5 years from a tight end position, right? So that's the bad part about it. But the Gators are exactly where they need to be right now. I mean, they control their own destiny. This ranking stuff is getting dumber by the week.
It's completely meaningless.
It is meaningless, but it's dumb. It's just absolutely dumb that Georgia is where they're at. Georgia is in a position right now, if the chips fall right, that they could find themselves playing in a college football semifinal. Like, a lot would have to happen.
Oh,
but
a lot would have to happen.
That's just absolutely a joke.
Yeah. All right. So I don't mean to rain on the parade, but I was thinking about this driving in today, knowing we were going to do Gator Bytes, and I like bringing this stuff to your attention because you're a straight shooter. You'll obviously not sugarcoat much. Florida is 7-1 on the year. Their victories have come against Ole Miss, South Carolina, Missouri, Vanderbilt, Arkansas. You obviously throw Georgia in there. I'm missing one, but it's an unranked team.
Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ole Miss at the beginning.
Okay.
Obviously they beat Georgia, and they lost to Texas A&M.
Did you actually say Kentucky?
Maybe it was Kentucky that I missed.
Yeah.
But they have beat 6, arguably 6 of the 7 worst teams in the SEC.
Uh-huh.
The Georgia win's a good one, although Georgia didn't have a quarterback. The one game Florida lost, they lost to a team Alabama beat by 28. Any concern for you there moving forward?
Man, you said a lot. First off, let me correct you on Georgia didn't have a quarterback. Georgia had a quarterback. Georgia chose not to play.
Georgia chose not to play.
Coaching is part of the game, and Georgia fans, you got your ass whipped, okay? Your coach is part of your team, and you got beat. So miss me with the will. If we had JT, you had JT. Your coach chose not to play him, so stop with it. And by the way, Florida, if they would have kept the foot on the gas, could have beat y'all by 50. All right, just shut up and stop. The other thing is, we went through this the other day on the Sports Den because JJ, our producer, said something very similar. Somehow Florida hasn't beaten anybody. You start going through college football.
Ohio State hadn't beaten anybody either.
Nobody's beaten anybody.
Yeah, agreed.
Everybody's schedule has been terrible.
Alabama did beat A&M and Georgia. Alabama's got 2 wins against top 10 teams.
Right.
But they might be the only one. Clemson hadn't beaten anybody.
Clemson hasn't beaten anybody. Notre Dame beat Clemson. Right?
Yeah,
but outside of that, like, nobody's really had that schedule.
And Notre Dame beat Clemson without Trevor Lawrence.
Right, and that's why it's like, this is the year that would be interesting to me if it was an 18 playoff and a BYU got in or something like that. Because you can't really say anybody's really battle-tested at this point. They've had weeks off because of COVID. They're battle-tested from that way, but not from a physical, like getting up every single Monday for 13 straight weeks with your body hurting and having just played the number 8 team and having to turn around and play the number 12 team. That just hasn't happened anywhere in college football. I just think it is a very unique year with that. Is it concerning? It's absolutely concerning, just for one reason and one reason only. Bama is a freaking machine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure every Florida fan got the same feeling I did watching that Bama-Auburn game. How in the heck are we going to stop Bama? How are they not going to put 50 up on our defense? It's a tall task.
Now, the only thing I'll say, the A&M game is more concerning for me. That Auburn team was pushed all over the field by Georgia. Absolutely pushed all over the field. Auburn beats teams they're supposed to beat, and they have gotten shellacked by teams that are better than them. I guess actually Auburn did with South Carolina, so even that statement's not necessarily
Should have lost
true.
Arkansas.
Yeah, but Auburn, when they played Alabama and when they played Georgia, they were not no contest.
I'm going by the history of Auburn, Alabama, though. Auburn always plays Alabama well. I mean, it's always a great game. I mean, if you were just looking at records and teams, and I wouldn't have been dialed in the way that I was on this past Saturday. Boy, Alabama just does it so many different ways, Hacker. Mac Jones is so good that he recognizes what you're trying to do defensively, and he just kills whatever it is. He's got so many weapons. It's tough to see. I mean, Florida's going to have to score dang near every possession to be in that game.
What did you make of Dan Mullen getting pretty heated towards Todd Grantham on the sideline?
He should have been. It was a moronic play call on Grantham's part. It was 3rd and 4, 3rd and 6 against a running quarterback, and you play straight man coverage. We teach this at the middle school level, huh? If you're mobile and you see them in man coverage, you take off
Mm-hmm.
because there's nobody that's there to catch you. And they did that, and they picked up. And Terry Wilson picked up the first down. He should have. He should have gone crazier. He should have fired him on the spot. That's dumb.
Now, Kentucky's offense isn't exactly the greatest show on turf. They're bad, quite frankly. But Florida's defense has been horrid most of the year. Any solace in the fact that after that opening drive, where Kentucky marched it right down and scored, they did very little the rest of the game? It was probably the best 2.5, 3 quarters the Gator defense has played this year.
I thought they played really well against Missouri.
Yeah, with the younger guys, that's
really
true.
well against Missouri.
That's true.
The Florida defense is so hot and cold. I don't know if there's. I get the sense that Grantham likes to play man because it causes less confusion. But you're not going to be able to do that against Alabama. Like, I mean, Alabama is one of those games that you can do it against Tennessee, but you can't do it against Alabama because that's going to be one of those games where they're going to score quickly. Let me get to what I'm trying to say. Florida fans, you're going to be frustrated by this defense because if they play what they're supposed to play, the other team's going to have the ball a long time.
Mm.
And you're going to see a lot of 6 and 7 and 8 yard passes, and then you're going to have to hope and pray that when the field gets shorter in the red zone, that somebody for Florida makes it play. That's the defense they're going to have to play. Against inferior teams, you can play man. That's what he was thinking against Kentucky. He just didn't take the very first thing you should take into consideration, which is the quarterback can run and is going to gash you. So I don't know what this Florida defense is. I know it's not good, and I know a streaky defense is an unreliable defense, and that's what they are at best right now.
Today's Gator Podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can log on to their website by going to se-ortho.com, and you can also listen for Southeast Orthopedic Specialists, the good Dr. Kevin Murphy, on Thursday mornings in the 7 o'clock hour, right here on 1010XL with Jeff and Dan for his weekly analysis of injuries in sports. When you look at the Gators moving forward, you look at Alabama moving forward, clearly on a collision course. I was telling the boys on XL Primetime earlier this week. I did a radio hit out in Kansas City. They had me on to talk about the firing of Dave Caldwell here in Jacksonville. But they usually throw an SEC question or two at the end. And one of the hosts out there, and I like the guys. They're good fellows. I go on with them quite often. They were talking about the Florida-Alabama game in Atlanta. And we kind of raised the hairs on my back a little bit. Ruffled my feathers, if you will, Denny, because they said, look, Florida's going to play Alabama. I don't give Florida hardly any shot in that game, but how would their season be if they made the title game and basically got annihilated in Atlanta? And I took issue with that. Would I right now, based on everything we've talked about for the last 10 minutes, would I pick Florida to beat Alabama? Probably not. Will I in a couple of weeks? Probably not. But to say that they have absolutely no shot with arguably the best Florida offense we've seen in years, I wouldn't go that far. I think they have a shot. It's not like Alabama's playing, Bowling Green in Atlanta on December 19th, which is how they made it sound like.
Well, I can give you a comparison. I think it's going to be very similar. I don't think I'm the first one to say this. I think it's going to be very similar to LSU last year. I think very similar. And if you remember the way that game played out, it was blow for blow the first half.
And then the turnover when Stingley had the pick.
Right. But you felt like you had to score every single time.
Yeah.
Right. And it was even one of those things where LSU would get the ball and they score in 2-3 minutes and it looked really easy. And then Florida, Dan Mullen showed his value, would have to dial up a fourth down play to keep a drive going. But Dan Mullen knew we got to score every single time to be in this game. I think it's that. I think it's like it's not going to be easy. We're going to go into the third quarter and it's going to be a ball game. But the first turnover that Florida has, or the first mistake, even the second punt probably means the game. Like that's probably the situation unless Florida can force some turnovers. But they cannot be behind in the turnover battle. It's not going to be one of those games where they can punt 3 times. Do they have a chance? Yeah. Because the funny thing is, as good as Alabama's defense is, I think Florida's offense is better than Alabama's defense. I do believe that. I just don't believe it's as big of a gap as there is between Alabama's offense and Florida's defense.
You see what the ACC did yesterday?
You know, I heard, but I didn't know.
So basically what happened is Notre Dame, they just gave them a spot in the ACC title game. And Clemson has one more game now. Basically, they gave Notre Dame and Clemson December 12th off. Neither one of them have to play. Their last game is going to be December 5th, so they're going to have 2 weeks off until the ACC championship game.
Okay.
And I think the reason you do that is obvious with the coronavirus and the COVID issues.
What about Miami?
All over the – well, no, because if Clemson wins Saturday –
Oh, gotcha.
they would have the tiebreaker over Miami.
Okay.
So if Clemson wins Saturday, then it doesn't matter. And I think at that point it would become official that Clemson also has the 12th off. I think that's the way it was worded. If Clemson wins, they have the 12th off.
Okay.
And the reason I bring that up, Alabama can officially wrap up the West on Saturday with whoever they play. Florida can officially wrap up the East on Saturday with a win over Tennessee, thus making the December 12th games inconsequential regarding the SEC championship game. If you're the Southeastern Conference, do you risk Alabama and Florida playing, quote, meaningless games regarding your conference championship and give them 2 weeks off to avoid any COVID issue leading into Atlanta on December 19th?
If you hadn't have told me what the ACC just did, I'd say, hell no, no way. Because in my mind, I would think about what if another conference did that, we would be screaming. Like, no, you can't do that. Like, that's like if the Big Ten or ACC, if the roles were reversed, I'd be like, no, heck no. They got to play their games. Like, you're taking away a chance for a loss. You're taking away a chance for an upset, which we normally see every year, a Saturday, littered with upsets. I don't know. I mean, who would they both play that final week?
Well, Florida would play LSU.
Right.
And I think Alabama, Arkansas got moved there maybe to December 12th. Like, I think the SEC is going to play the games, but with the way COVID is spreading across this country and games being canceled left and right, a nightmare scenario for the Southeastern Conference would be the SEC championship game being canceled because either Florida or Alabama.
It's not going to be canceled.
Well,
bump it back a week.
Yeah, but then you're getting into dangerous territory with the whole playoff. You'd have to then move everything else back.
I don't. The college football is going to go as the SEC goes. I mean, we all know that.
Probably.
If they have to bump that game to the 19th, they have to bump to the 19th. I would like to see Florida play LSU. I think it would be good for them before they play Alabama to play LSU.
And by the way, I think they will. I just thought it was interesting what the ACC did.
Yeah, no, it is interesting and very ACC-ish. Like, that's – we're definitely going to talk about that now on Sports Day because that is – wow. I mean, they're going to blame that on COVID, but what they're really doing is protecting their two chances to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, well, I mean, mathematically it's over. Both teams have advanced if Clemson wins on Saturday. Which...
Yeah, that's BS, man. You can't do that, ACC. That's pathetic.
Well,
the ACC is a cluster, by the way. The ACC is what's happening at Florida State is a direct reflection of what the ACC leadership has become.
Okay, expand on that.
The ACC should be taking the reign on what's happening in Tallahassee. Their testing protocol, their testing policy, the fact that they've had 2 games now canceled the day of, either their testing sucks or there's no way they should be allowing Florida State to do that. The ACC is handling this thing horribly wrong. Horribly wrong.
Did you get a lot of what Kirk Herbstreit said last night?
Yeah, I did. And
for people that missed it, Kirk Herbstreit's on the college football ranking show, and he's basically talking about situations like Florida State where games are being canceled the day of, testing protocols. And Herbstreit actually ripped Michigan over the coals, but he then backtracked and apologized. But basically what Herbie was saying is that he has been told from coaches around the country, coaches have told him that they believe there are schools that are using COVID cases to essentially get out of playing games so they don't get humiliated.
Put 2 and 2 together. He's close with Dabo. Dabo needs to shut up. Dabo, enough, dude. Like,
you think that was Dabo that did that?
Yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, Dabo's acting like a dang middle schooler right now. Shut up and coach your program, right? If that's what Florida State did, and that's what they did, but they had 30-something positives the next week or 30-something out the next week. if that's what they're doing, then they know that. Then that's shame on them. And I don't think it is what they're doing, by the way. I think it's just horrible management and just an unorganized program in Tallahassee, and this is the result of it. I don't think they're running from anything. I just think they're terrible. Right? They're terrible at everything they do right now, football related. But with all that being said, like, we wouldn't even be having this question if the ACC was the SEC and the ACC was the one making the announcement that these games are being canceled or not leaving it on the individual schools.
Well, I think what you're going to have, and it's interesting, we had Mark Richt on XL Primetime yesterday, and he basically echoed it as well on the ACC network this past weekend. The Pac-12 is not going to have any playoff representatives.
Right.
They're done. The Big 12 is not going to have any playoff representatives. They're done. If Ohio State only plays 5 games, can you put Ohio State in the playoff at 5-0?
Yeah.
Okay, well, hold that thought. Because what Mark Richt said is he is of the opinion that he thinks the playoff is going to consist of 2 SEC teams and Clemson and Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So you would put Ohio State in at 5-0.
They're one of the 4 best teams in the country.
And playing 5 games.
They're one of the 4 best teams in the country.
Based on what? Preseason rankings?
On everything.
They beat Indiana.
They've got one of the best rosters. They got one of the best coaches. They've got a history. You can't say that.
History means nothing. History is supposed to mean nothing.
Really?
Yes.
In this situation, history means nothing.
What does history have anything to do with 2020?
How does you can go back in time a number of times where Alabama has a loss and still got in the playoffs.
And that's not
right
that's
either. History. Like, we're doing the same thing. Nobody's played anybody. They've only played 5 games that consisted of nobody. Everybody's on a level playing field. They're one of the 4 best teams in the country, period.
So you're going to put Ohio State in at 5-0 over 9-1 Texas A&M.
Yeah, Texas A&M lost to Alabama.
They beat Florida.
If Alabama is going to get in there, and Florida the only way Florida gets in is if they beat Alabama.
Yeah, they have to win out, yeah.
Right? So, I mean, yeah, one of them's either going to win the championship or one of them will have beat the person in question. That seems pretty simple to me. I don't 5-0, 3-0, 2-0. The minute that Ohio State said, the Big Ten said, hey, we're playing, Ohio State was the one that as long as they didn't lose a game, they're in.
So the Big Ten deemed that 6 games is not, or 5 games is not enough to win the Big Ten championship. Mm-hmm. You have to play a minimum of 6. But yet they could still play for the college football playoff.
Yeah, two separate things.
Yeah.
You don't have to win a championship to get to the playoff. If you did, we'd have to go back and rewrite history.
It's an absolutely crazy year, and that would just add to it. But it will be interesting because at least Florida is in the conversation. Isn't it nice for the first time in, 2012, I guess, when the playoff wasn't even around then? This is the first time since the college football playoff has been around that Florida's in the conversation. Because in years past, when they've been good, they've lost to Georgia, and they really weren't in the conversation. They clearly are here in 2020.
Well, even the years they went to the SEC championship game with McElwain, they lost to Florida State the week before.
And they got crushed by Florida State.
And you knew they weren't going to do anything against Alabama.
Right.
This is a whole different scenario.
There is a football game to talk about this Saturday, and we'll get to that in just one moment. Today's Gator Podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. They're Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center, providing an unparalleled level of care across numerous locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. That includes Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, Fleming Island, and St. John. Certainly appreciate everybody for listening on 1010XL.com, everybody for watching us on the 1010XL Florida Gator Facebook page. Gators in Tennessee on Sunday brings back horrible memories from a football perspective. The last time Florida-Tennessee was played in December, it was obviously the events of September 11th that moved the game. Florida entered that game as number 1 or number 2 in the land. Yeah. Travis Stevens runs for 200+. Tennessee beats Florida, eliminating any shot of a national championship.
In a crazy game.
A crazy game, and that actually cost Florida the East. It won't cost Florida the East this time. Potentially it could, but it wouldn't outright cost them. It would cost them a shot at the national title. No way history repeats itself, right?
No. To talk about that 0-1 game is a completely separate discussion than to talk about.
I'm just saying, Florida, Tennessee, first Saturday in December.
No, you connect the dots perfectly. But that 0-1 Tennessee team was really good.
Yeah, they were.
They were really good as well. They were, it was an upset, but it wasn't a shocker. Right? And it was in Neyland, right?
Oh, it was in the whole
thing. I remember I was at a wedding. Huge Gator fans. huge Gator fans. And so I was at a wedding that was when it was supposed to. So they didn't know there would be a football game. They actually scheduled the wedding in what was supposed to be that off week. And as soon as the wedding was over, we all went to the reception and they had TVs out. None of us were paying attention to anything but this game, including the groom. So it was, that's one of those things where I will always remember that. It was an amazing game that if you weren't a Florida fan, you probably would have enjoyed just the game of football. But you're right. It was
as a Florida fan,
heartbreaking.
Leaving the swamp that day, it was crushing.
The swamp.
Yeah, it was in the swamp.
Oh, I thought it was
definitely in Gainesville.
Oh, okay.
It was a horrible feeling.
I'm trying to remember what. There was something. Okay, go ahead. I was thinking it was in Neyland for a different reason.
No, but I mean, think about it. 01's an odd year. This is 20. Right. It's an even year. This year it's in Neyland.
The whole thing was just surreal. 2020 is a little different thing, but very similar feeling in 2001, right? It was just.
It's odd that Florida and Tennessee are playing this late in the year. It's odd that Florida and Tennessee are obviously playing in December. It does bring back memories of 2001. It's going to be cold up in Knoxville. They're even saying potentially snow later in the game. They're talking about high 30s, low 40s at kickoff. It's going to be unlike things that Florida is used to. Having said that, Tennessee is horrible.
Can we address the snow thing?
Sure.
It's not going to be a blizzard.
No, but
I would rather, if I'm a Florida guy, I would rather play in good weather and snow than driving rain.
Yeah, that's fine. I'd rather play in 55 degrees.
Well, sure,
and
but
sunny.
I'm saying like people are making a big deal out of this. Like, oh, well, Florida's never played in cold weather and it may snow. The snow's irrelevant because the snow does. I mean, it's a little bit of moisture. It's not like what Florida's played in the past where there's issues gripping the ball. That's not the thing. The cold affects you until you get hit once. Mm-hmm. And then you're in the flow of the game and you're good to go. I don't know how it affects kickers. Maybe it does.
Well, it's not as if Tennessee's in the Arctic either most of the year.
No,
they're going to be affected too.
This is it's way overblown. It's like if they were going somewhere, if they were going to Green Bay and it was going to be 10 degrees and it was going to be ice and a blizzard, then okay, I got it. But snow flurries? Like, come on, y'all. It's not that big of a deal.
When's the last time it snowed during a Gator game?
I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about somebody commented on the Facebook Live. By the way, y'all please like and share this. We appreciate that. About Feinbaum. And it's talking about Feinbaum said that Florida's going to be affected, that they can't handle the cold weather at Tennessee. It's 30 degrees.
That would be a fascinating question. I actually do think you're downplaying it too much. To be honest, I think it's more of an issue than I don't think it's as big an issue as some are making it out to be. I think it's more of an issue than you're making it out to be.
I think it's a non-issue. I think it is a complete and utter non-issue.
Well, I hope so.
If there's not wind, you get out there, you warm up, you get a quick sweat, you go when you come back out, you're shocked by the cold a little bit, you take a hit or two, and then you're good. And from that point, it doesn't matter if it's long-term effects throughout the game. 95 affects you more throughout a game than 35.
I would be curious to know if Florida's ever played in a snow game. Or snow flurries or anything. I have no idea. I can't remember. Maybe somebody on Facebook knows.
Wasn't the stat, it would have to be like Kentucky, but they play them so early, because wasn't there a stat that they hadn't played an out-of-state, out-of-conference game in how long?
Yeah, forever.
Yeah, so my guess would be no.
The coldest game I can ever remember being at was the South Carolina game up at Williams-Brice in 1995. That was Steve Tannehill for the South Carolina Gamecocks, the ponytail. Florida won that game 63-7. I don't know if anybody on Facebook was at that game. I was in the top row of Columbia, South Carolina. I was 12 years old. It was freezing. Absolutely. They had like a nor'easter, a freak nor'easter hit, and it was just awful. But anyway, regardless, it's going to be a little bit cold. It's going to be odd playing Tennessee. People are going to be talking about 2001, having said all that. You know Jeremy Pruitt a little bit. You know that Tennessee program a little bit. They're terrible. Now, this would be a season saver. This would be maybe a job saver for Jeremy Pruitt. But for the life of me, unless Florida turns the ball over 3 times, Denny, commits 12 penalties, it's going to take things like that to keep Tennessee in the game.
Did I see that they're starting Harrison Bailey?
Over Tennessee? Oh, I didn't even see that, no.
There was talk of it. I don't know if he's just in the running.
It wouldn't surprise me. They've had issues at quarterback all year.
Harrison's a good player. But, I think you base defense, keep everything in front of you. I just don't think that Tennessee don't have the firepower. I'm more confident in this game than I was in Kentucky. Like Kentucky at least has a defense that's legit when they're playing well. Like that's at least they have that. Tennessee doesn't even have that. So I don't think I think Arkansas was a harder game. I think Kentucky was a harder game. So I think Florida runs away with this. I want to be clear one thing. Circle back around to the cold. You're going to see in the pregame, you're going to see like Florida guys shivering, and you're going to see them talking about how cold it is. Y'all trust me, man. That just goes away when it's snapped. Once they go back into the locker room, they lock the pads in, they come back out, it goes away. You know what sucks for? The 30 kids that never get on the field are going to freeze their butts off. The guys who are on the field constantly, I'm telling you, after the first series, it's a non-factor.
You know, as we begin to wrap up, South Carolina's job is open.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt's job is now open. First off, do you see any more SEC jobs coming open? Maybe Tennessee, maybe somewhere else?
Tennessee is not flush with cash, so that buyout's going to be an issue. Auburn's in the same boat. So I don't know. I mean, it's a weird year because of the cash flow situation. The cash flow situation of places like Florida State is dire, right? So that's going to be a bigger consideration than what it's been in the past. Do we fire the coach and pay the $15 million buyout? Because the $15 million buyout is only part of it. Then you agree to a new contract with a new salary, with a new buyout, and you get in Florida State situation, and now you've got a coach you can't fire because you'd be paying like $40 million of buyouts by the time everything's said and done.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's going to be anything else open up, especially when you consider Missouri's got a new coach, Arkansas's got a new coach recently. So I think that probably is about it, unless one of the major programs has a surprise and the coach goes to the NFL or, retires or some crazy. So that's the only time.
Let's assume, real quick, South Carolina and Vandy, the only two jobs open. Gator fans need to be concerned at all about Brian Johnson?
I think no. I think Brian's going to need to make a stop along the way if he were to leave now. I think if Brian stays for 2, 3, 4 more years and they continue to have success, then maybe he can make that jump as a never been head coach and just an OC to an SEC program. But I think if he were to leave now, he'd have to take a stop.
Group of 5.
MAC or something like that to get to that next level. Maybe, Vandy, maybe. I'd be shocked if Brian would go to Vandy, though. That would shock me if he did.
Well, we'll see what happens. But
I'll tell you this, if he did, they'd have quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I'd make damn sure of it.
Brian Johnson.
He's elite.
You have a good relationship with him. He's a very good recruiter. So a lot of the talent you see for Florida, give Mullen credit, give Grantham credit, give Brian Johnson credit, too, because he's a very good coach and a very good recruiter. We don't give Grantham credit.
But, hey, real quick before we go, tons of stuff on Facebook Live, and appreciate that. But there's one asking about recruiting. I just give me 30 seconds on this. They're in great. I think they're like 7th or 8th right now. Their class is right, but they are in play for multiple 5-stars.
They're in play for 5 guys. 5. They've made the list, the cut-down list for I think 5 of the top 230. But keep in mind, a lot of those 230 have already committed. These are 5 in the 230 that have not committed yet.
Well, here's the bigger point I was trying to make. You're going to see more than usual. You're going to see this list change quite a bit over the course of the next 30 days. People are going to start dropping the bottom third. When they look, and I don't say dropping by rankings, I'm saying by where they have them ranked, not 247 or rivals. As they start to learn who's coming back, because remember this year don't count, you're going to start to see a ton of decommitment letters from kids. It's already happened with a couple of ours, where the colleges said, listen, we don't have the spot. They took the commitment, they're excited about them. It just doesn't work out.
There have been a lot of local kids here in Jacksonville that have decommitted recently.
Right, and there's a reason.
Yeah.
And so that's going to work its way up to the Florida, Alabamas, all that kind of stuff when they sort out who's coming back, who's leaving, who's graduating, who's leaving early, and they see how many spots they have. So never in the history of the world has recruiting rankings meant less on December 2nd than they do right now. Tune back in, I would say, early February, and then you'll get a better idea.
Yeah, but needless to say,
But they're recruiting well.
Mullen is recruiting very well. There's no question about that. And keep in mind, look what he's recruiting against in Tallahassee right now. All right, if it's some,
he's not recruiting against that.
That's kind of what I'm saying. Florida's getting anybody they want compared to like Florida State. Now, Manny Diaz in Miami, Dan Mullen in Florida, they're going head to head on a few. But obviously, Mullen's also competing with Dabo at Clemson, Gus Malzahn at Auburn, Nick Saban at Alabama.
Kirby.
Florida's going head to head with a lot, and Kirby at Georgia.
Yep.
Florida's going head to head with a lot of these.
Dark horse to watch this year is Georgia Tech in recruiting.
Jeff Collins is doing a good job.
He's doing a heck of a job, and he's turning some heads, and that's a dark horse to watch of them finishing with the top 15 class.
Denny, enjoyed it, my friend. We'll be back next week to recap Tennessee and to look forward to the regular season finale against Edwards, Huron, and LSU.
Can't wait.
That is Denny Thompson. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. Thank you for watching and listening to Gator Bytes right here on 1010XL.com and on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.